Coming up next, we have Alex Muller from ChainSafe, actually. Alex Muller is head of product at ChainSafe. Being a product guy since the time when it wasn't fancy, Alex discovered his passion for decentralization in 2015, thanks to IPFS. Now, before joining ChainSafe, Alex pursued his second passion in infosec. That's information security for the uninitiated, for fun and profit in a variety of product-related roles and organizations. When Alex is not staring at displays, he loves to read, he loves to hike and ride his gravel bike, and yeah. He'll be speaking to us about product in Web3 today. So that's product in Web3, same, but different. So Alex, I would like to invite you onto the stage. And yeah, feel free to unhide your camera, unmute your microphone.
Was emotional and intense. Yeah, really. Yeah, also thank you and welcome from my side by Aiden, our CEO. Actually, I myself have ChainSafe just joined about 3 months ago, so I joined quite in the mid of this really incredible journey of scaling and of new and exciting opportunities. And yeah, as Tim already mentioned before, for the longest time I've basically been in Web2 and watched Web3 space more from the sideline. And now, since I basically went full in to Web3, there's kind of some questions that constantly come to mind and kind of I'm constantly thinking about. And those two are basically, the first hand is how can we basically maximize our impact in terms of how can we bring mainstream. And the second one is how does this really differ to the Web2 type products where there's basically a lot of examples of how transition to the mainstream looks like. Want to speak about today. So I want to use next 20 minutes. I hope I can share my screen right now to share my thoughts on the topic. And yeah, ideally, I hope that we can have a discussion afterwards in terms of your points and your views on the topic. Yeah, so here we go. First question, yeah, what is this? Does anybody know what it is? Maybe you can answer in the chat window. There's a small hint. It's no armadillo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, it's definitely a bell curve, a normal distribution. That sounds right. So when you have a kind of a product and marketing background, then usually this looks also familiar to you, but not necessarily from a normal distribution type of association, but more like from the tech adoption lifecycle from Geoffrey Moore. That's actually something, or a model that is almost 30 years old by now, but still seems to be very valid. And I think it will be also valid for Web3, and basically describes how a new and disruptive becomes adopted by mainstream markets. And what you can see here is basically which basically shows 5 different stages, or that represent basically 5 groups of users that adopt the technology one after the other. And yeah, the bell curve basically symbolizes and shows that there's 2 very heavy segments in the middle, and there's quite some smaller segments on the outside. Yeah, these segments then are also associated. This is kind of part of the model, and I will use this model now to basically then show some of the unique twists, I think, to mainstream adoption for Web3. So I will now go a little bit more into detail what this model is about, and then we will dive in the second part a little bit more into specifics of Web3 in this regards. Yeah, so basically, as said, the curve or the distribution shows the amount of users joining or using a technology. And these 5 groups or stages that I mentioned in the lifecycle, they have names. You can read here, they are called by tech enthusiasts, visionaries, pragmatics. And I think one of the really achievements in this model that Geoffrey Moore made is basically that he assigned kind of characteristics. who are using technology for technology's sake. That means they are not really value driven. They simply like technology and like to spend time on technology. And then there's a second group of visionaries that are more like people that actually already see strategic advantages or benefits that they basically want to be first movers, and that's why they start early with adopting a new technology. And then we have more other groups like pragmatics that already are very cautious in terms of, so they do not really like drastic changes and stuff like that. They are more like guys that want incremental improvements and very well laid out products. And then we have a fourth group and fifth group, which is then already sometimes considered as being more like the aftermarket. That means people that usually do not follow trends, that are very suspicious about new technologies, and that basically hide as long as they can before something new. So this whole cycle has imagine this for an innovation, for example, like the telephone or another quite, then this cycle could take multiple decades in order to complete, and even for products to reach, or technologies to reach mainstream adoption. But this cycle has decreased drastically. So when we think about the internet already, then this cycle has decreased to, I think, around 15 years to 10 years. And when we think about the smartphone and subsequent technologies, this cycle becomes shorter and shorter. This is also due, partly due to, I think, that world in general. So software is a kind of already between a lot of people that this is technology that is the foundation for a lot of things. So new advancement based on software usually, I would say, tend to have a more easy time basically to getting adopted. Yeah, and then the significant part in this model is not let's say these 5 segments, but that Geoffrey Moore basically said usually these segments kind of you can basically hop from one of those segments to the other. That means when you have a kind of product, or you have wanted to introduce a new technology to the market, then you start with the tech enthusiasts first. You find them. These are usually around, I do not know, I think around 5 to 6%. And you try to find them. You go to maybe hackathons or maybe other types of events where you probably will find those people, and where you can meet them, and then you can basically show them your new product technology, convince them that this is a good thing, and that they become basically ambassadors for invention, and then you can use references from one stage always as an entry point in the second stage in terms of marketing. But what is basically introduced here, and you might have heard this term already. That means what Geoffrey Moore basically postulated was that this referencing from one group to another will not work when you go from the early, basically the first 2 segments we mentioned, to the mainstream market. Because pragmatists, this is this first segment of the main, do not really like basically drastic change or even like disruptive change. They want incremental improvements, and they do not really trust visionaries because they think, maybe they are some kind of dreamers or whatever. Basically what he postulated, that there's this kind of chasm, which basically makes it very hard for a lot of technologies and come out of the early market into the mainstream market. And the most technologies and products basically, I mean, he uses like very drastic language there, but die, he says something like die on the left side of. So he also postulates an approach, and I think this will be the last dimension to the model. He also postulates an approach that you should use to basically achieve success in mainstream markets. At first, he says, when you have a certain product that serves a certain use case, you should look for a very specific and very small group that you focus on. For example, when we think about Web3s, there's at the moment a lot of use cases that have the potential to reach mainstream. Things like creator economies, NFTs. When we have seen things like the 300 million investment in Niantic the last week, then I think this shows a lot of confidence that this use case and also the metaverse can reach mainstream adoption. We have, of course, gaming, play to earn, and those kinds of use cases as well. So you would then basically choose one of those use cases and then select a very small, very, very small market segment in terms of users and focus your efforts completely on them. That means you take, for example, when you think about the creator, maybe say, oh, I'm an expert in black metal. So we kind of shape our value proposition specific to black metal type of bands or creators and kind of bring this concept to them. And then basically we to have a very focused approach with a very small segment in this pragmatics basically group of users, and in order to basically have a small, he also mentions this or calls it then a foothold in the mainstream market. And from this foothold, then you would try to develop the other spaces. So this is all kind of Web 2-ish. So this is the usual approach that is recommended for a new product or technology to enter the market. And yeah, we have seen, for example, with I would say NBA Top Shots or other types of just recent NFT-based use case, we have definitely seen that that this approach is taken and is seems to be already very promising. But I think there's one, my thought then led to a point where I say that kind of some specifics here that I think make it kind of different for a Web3 product to basically customer. The first one is innovation speed. So in a lot of, also in my background, a lot of scenarios, you would have always a kind of advantage when you were the first mover in a market, because you had like maybe a closed source product, which basically would allow you to kind of have a little bit of head start. Web3 is different. The open source nature, which is essentially in the DNA of Web3, with transparency, security, and all the other aspects, basically leads to a situation. On the one hand, we have, of course, very fast innovation, because as soon as a product appears or a new project appears on the market, basically the whole industry is advanced, because everybody can learn and can benefit from the advancements that those projects have created. So this is on the one hand, of course, incredibly important to the innovation speed of Web3, but on the other hand, and leads to a commoditization, of course, of the protocol layer. But on the other hand, it creates a very constant innovation. Also, this is at the end, of course, for the industry and for the group as a whole and for the market as a whole, a very good thing, because nobody can basically stand still on their achievements. You always have to constantly innovate, and we have seen various cases like Uniswap, others, where it was very obvious that that actually a small head start isn't worth a lot. So what this means is at the end, and how does this relate to the customer at all? So what I already mentioned is the really competitive nature of Web3. Products have to constantly innovate. So there's a very small first mover advantage only. And this pressure leads them to focus more on the competition in the. And whereas this is good to focus on the competition and to kind of try to innovate and try to become better than them, it takes away from thinking about the mainstream market. We didn't talk too detailed about the sizes of the 5 segments, but usually assume that the early market, which is kind of these first 2 groups, is only around 15% of the total market. And already this third segment is basically also already double the size than the whole early market. So from a let's say from an effort point on and impact point of view, it might be a good idea to focus on the mainstream part earlier, but as said, the Web3 nature makes this quite hard and challenging because the early market is so competitive. Yeah, second point. Second point is, yeah, most of the products in Web3 are protocol-based, or a lot of them are protocol. And they at the end multi-segment, multi-sided and stacked. And we will go over these terms one by one. So multi-segment means basically that they address multiple user segments at the same time. So when you take an app like Compound or whatever, then it usually is a protocol and an application at the same time. That means it focuses on developers that basically use the protocol programmatically, as well as end users that kind of use the application that was maybe built for demonstration purposes on top, and use this. So this is usually different in Web2 type products, because in Web2 type products in the early market, you would usually focus on one user segment and would, for example, things like developer interaction, this would usually, or third-party additions, that would usually be part of the offering only at a later stage. So this is different here for Web3 products, as most of them are protocol-based and, yeah, as such, inherently multi-segment. The second one is they are multi-sided. That means we have usually not only one type of users, but we have multiple types of users that basically use the application or use the protocol. Yeah, for Compound, you would see lenders and borrowers, for example, or you would have users and liquidity providers, for example, on other types of platforms. So multi-sided platforms in Web2 and Web3 alike have kind of the chicken egg problem. That means you basically have to attract both segments at the same time to create value on the platform. It's referred to as the cold start problem. But also, basically those user bases that you have on the protocol or on the Web2 platform create then network effects. And there's a variety of different network effects. There's a lot of great literature on that, but the essence is that network effects defensibility, because this community and the value that is created because of the community cannot easily be copied. For Web3 type of products, however, there are some aspects that make this a little different. On the one hand, we have weaker defensibility because of the open source nature of the protocols and products that, yeah, I've mentioned this already in the first point. And the second aspect is that we have layered network effects. And this basically brings us then to the third point, to stacked. So whereas in a normal like Web2 type context, like when you take a platform like Airbnb or I do not know, or Uber, then usually you would have one network effect that is basically driving the platform. What we have in Web3 is in a lot of situations that we have basically protocols on top of protocols and networks on top of networks. So we have a variety of network effects that are going on in parallel, basically on different layers of the stack. When we take Ethereum, for example, there's the network of, that means all the nodes that are participating, which is already a kind of network effect that is called an interaction network. Then we have on top, we have smart contracts, which are a kind of platform where basically developers of smart contracts and users of smart contracts come together. And when you then composable smart contracts into account, then you even have another interaction network that sits at as a network effect on top. Yeah, so how does this relate to the CSCON, or how does this make the CSCON for Web3 special? So the third thing is that this innovation speed that we mentioned in the beginning already leads to a quite fragmented and fast-moving industry. This by itself is not a bad thing, because it fosters innovation, creates a lot of choice in terms of the solutions that I want to use, but it also lacks matching. So typical Web2 type platforms, they would have a kind of a capability that is usually referred to as matching in the context of network effects. And this can be a thing like an app store or something else that is basically used as a programmatic helper for users, or for, let's say, one side of the platform to find the offerings of the other side of the platform. That means when you have, like, for example, the App Store on the iPhone, then it would connect the app developer with the application users. Whereas, of course, we have by design on Web3 an emphasis on open architectures. It's not as easy as in a closed shop to create such a matching type or aggregation type of functionality or capability. But this lack of capability basically makes it more difficult for users to find the right dApp, for example. And this can, on the one hand, weaken network effects, but on the other side leads also to a situation where it becomes harder to cross the chasm, because usually then mainstream type of people do not want to take any additional efforts in terms of I have to find the correct application or stuff like this, or even like getting to know a lot of different alternatives to the same problem that they might have. Yeah, so and the second one is the stacks, layer 1, layer 2 protocols, and the different stacks of Web3 have a very huge impact on the overall value proposition and network effects. This means that it should be a very careful decision you want to own, because a stack might even be able to create a negative network. For example, when like on the node operation side in Ethereum, you might have high gas fees just because there's actually too much load on the network. I see I have to hurry a little bit. Yeah, so the third part is, or the third aspect here is really community ownership. Of course, here also this is a great advantage and innovation in Web3 that kind of a lot of Web3 products include in their vision already to transfer governance over the products to the users. This sometimes referred to as exit to the community. And Web3 products introduce a lot of mechanisms such as token-based on-chain or off-chain voting systems, DAOs, and other types of programmatic help to basically efficiently govern the community. In relation to the chasm, we have to say that that such a community, on the one hand, can make it more difficult to make drastic changes, because your product will probably look drastically different for an early market than it will look for the mainstream market. And as soon as you have started to basically, for example, transfer ownership of your protocol or Web3 product to the community, it becomes maybe a lot harder to align the community about drastic changes on the product. So there's always then a point to consider on which type of your journey adoption it might make sense to basically still have a lot of the control over the project, basically divided just a small amount of people, because then you are faster and can more easily make drastic changes to the project, or when it's then the right time to basically transfer the ownership to a community that is aligned under the same vision of mainstream market adoption. Yeah, with this, I basically want to propose 3 things that I think are very important for Web3 products if they want to basically enter mainstream adoption. The first thinking, and the whole product model quite versions of a product, depending on which of the segments on the technology adoption cycle you sell. So that means, especially as I've just mentioned 2 minutes ago, a product for the early market will look drastically different as a product for the mainstream market. So a product for the mainstream market really has to be very comprehensive, and also has to then include things like, I do not know, services, installation help, on and off ramps, maybe a wallet, all things that are basically needed to achieve the objective that or the value. They all have to be bundled together, and basically a mainstream user expects that he does not have to install additional stuff, for example. Yeah, thinking about or having a whole product approach very early market phases is very important, not only to already think about potential partnerships, and Aidan has explained it really great, and I couldn't phrase it better, that collaboration is about everything. And also for the whole product approach, it's very very important to collaborate, because I think crossing the chasm will be a joint effort and will be hard for single Web3 products. And so it's very important to start this early and not get caught in this battle with the early market competitors, as I have highlighted a minute ago. Yeah, the second aspect is maybe controversial, but I think we have to be, then when we want to really come to mainstream adoption, we can't oversell Web3. What do I mean by that? I mean that Web3, and we all are aligned on this, provides great benefits and value for not only the society, but for a lot of different aspects of our. But the mainstream market, and we think about a group that is already referred to as the pragmatics, then we have to be intentful of how we basically bring them change, because whereas for the early market, an aspect like decentralization can be a criteria of value, this will not be true for the mainstream market. So for the mainstream market, I would expect that they do not care as we do. So we kind of have to take a different approach to basically bring basically the unique benefits that we see in the technology to them, without to focusing too much on certain aspects of the technology that we care about the most. Yeah, some things here from personal experience. I've been in infosec for quite a while. So one point is, for example, for consumer type products, privacy and security is often overrated. A lot of consumers do not really care about that, even if they say they care about that. They actually don't. And when you see the user base of large of Amazon, Facebook, and Google, then this is exactly the proof that most people simply do not care. At least not enough to basically change their behavior. And the other aspect is like, usually users overestimate the value of their solution. So if we just have a product and try to sell a product that basically is the, I do not know, the decentralized version of Airbnb, I hope I do not step on anybody's toes now, but then to place this product in the mainstream market, because decentralization might not be a criteria that they value so much or value that much, and then to change from one solution to another, there are studies that show that the perceived value for the user has to be 10x. That means when I have a product and have another product that fulfill the same problem for me, the new or the contender solution or the contender product has to be 10x better for me to basically trigger this change in behavior. Third aspect, also this ties again to collaboration. So we need partnerships, we need ecosystems. I will speed up a little bit. Aidan has phrased this already to a great extent. So mainstream markets need comprehensive products, and we cannot bring them to the market by ourselves alone. So we need partnerships. We must leverage the kind of unique opportunities that to fund ecosystems, and to basically ensure that we can create value propositions that are much more comprehensive than the single product from a single company or the single project from a single organization can provide. Only when we take this approach, I'm very convinced we will be able to get to mainstream adoption. Yeah, one key aspect that I think was not mentioned explicitly here, but is in all these basically three points that we just discussed, is accessibility. And this is something where I really say, I think that this is important for every project. When we have a Web3 type product, then accessibility is one of the key and fundamental things that we have to achieve in order to get to mainstream adoption. And for Web3 type products, this has not only one aspect. This is the functional side you can see here on the left, but it has more like three aspects. There's a functional side. This is what you would traditionally see as user experience. We have an economic side. So if we want to have people participating in our networks, then we have to make we have to ensure also economic accessibility, which is at the end you can phrase as affordability, for example. So the transaction fees have to make sense for users. Also requirements for staking or requirements for node operation have to be as low as possible to basically easy as possible for or enable as many as possible people to basically join. And then of course we have the technical side, which is ties back to the point I mentioned that basically developers and users are here are basically addressed at the same time by protocols or Web3 type products. And technical accessibility then ties back to points like libraries, like SDKs, like learning and education material that is really needed in order to basically foster and flourish an ecosystem around the protocol that we have. Yeah, maybe on a closing remark, also, of course, accessibility is a key topic here for us at ChainSafe. As Aidan has already mentioned, a lot of our projects aim to improve accessibility of Web3 ecosystems, such as Ethereum, Polkadot, Filecoin. And yeah, I just want to mention a few here, which is ChainBridge, multi-modular and multi-directional blockchain bridge that enables mobility between certain blockchains. This is also a key aspect to accessibility, in our opinion. Second one, files and storage, which provide the easiest way for consumers and developers to access and leverage the unique values of distributed storage. And the third one was already mentioned as well, is our gaming or metaverse SDK that provides the easiest way to basically bridge the blockchain to the games or the metaverse as such. Yeah, and with this, I'm through basically. So I hope there's some questions, and yeah, I hope to get points of view or some things that we might be able to add in terms of things to consider for mainstream adoption. Thank you.
Awesome, Alex. That was an amazing talk. Thank you for your time. And yeah, productization has been such a critical and important topic to ChainSafe. So hearing your insights, you know, applying like Web2 thinking to Web3 thinking has been just fascinating. So thank you for your time. Phil had a funny comment there saying it looks like there's space for another developer tool in that chart. We have a lot of questions actually. So maybe I'll do the top 3 just because we're running a little bit behind on time. But first question is from Jonathan Lorimer with 7 upvotes. Well done, Jonathan, great question. Crossing the chasm emphasizes identifying a killer app and being best in class at a narrow mandate. What specific use case should Web3 evangelists focus on, in your opinion?
That's a good question. At the moment, my definitely, I mean, you do not know what you don't know, you know, so there might be something coming up. From the use cases I see right now and that I have mentioned, I would definitely see NFTs and a wider adoption of NFTs. That means not only, let's say, utility tokens, social tokens, but also bringing them to virtual realities, for example, as the most promising use case as of now. And the second aspect is very interesting on the question. This is like, yeah, actually, it's like Jonathan wrote here that the original model basically promotes that you should be best in class in the early market before you. And I thought about this a lot. And I think, to be honest, as we have this high innovation pressure in the early, I think it's in the leader. It's not mandatory to be in class because the advantage you gain from being best in class is not the same in Web3 anymore. So it's, from my perspective, also not so important to be the best. You should be one of the leaders, but I think it's not mandatory to be basically best in class before you approach mainstream. And I hope when this is I could bring across is that really mainstream adoption should be taken as early as possible, because yeah, it will make life easier at every stage.
Thank you for that. One more question from Dan. Do you believe that Web3 technologies and the capabilities they provide can and maybe should disrupt the traditional models of product development and management?
I think definitely that, for example, this is already happening. That means to a large extent, traditional, let's say, product processes like discovery, where you work with users together in terms of finding out, hey, what is potential problems or potential opportunities that we can address, finding basically new capabilities that can add value to the product by using Web3 mechanisms like this very transparent governance, this very transparent voting schemes that you can have. You basically, I would not say you take away a lot, but it makes input and feedback collection and prioritizing of efforts a lot easier, and makes it a lot more transparent in terms of which are initiatives where most of the community sees value in, and which are maybe initiatives that just a small amount of definitely product development product will benefit dramatically from Web3. And yeah, that's probably a good topic for a next talk, I think.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I think we'll have to maybe, if one of our help desk people can save some of these questions, so perhaps like Alex can address them like a blog post or an article later, that would be amazing, just because we have to kind of move ahead with the schedule. But Alex, thank you so much for your time. That was a super informative talk, and it seems like a lot of people really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. The conference, and see you soon on the floor.